Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wise Words. My name is Mapin Hlangu, and this is a production of the Pan-African Businesswomen Association. Over the past 6 months, we have brought you insightful conversations and wise words from influential women in the continent who are working in global institutions like the United Nations, World Trade Organization, and those who are doing business in different parts of the continent. We have collected special quotes from these queens, produced an ebook of quotes to memorize their wise words. The book is dedicated to the UN Women on the occasion of their 10th anniversary. They have been steadfast in the fight for global gender equality and justice. Over the past 10 years, they've catalyzed a global culture of women movements across the world, driving an agenda that will never again allow women to be less in all aspects of life. We are grateful to you. Now, Pabwa was founded to advocate for women to be actively prioritized in the economic agenda of Africa towards a goal of seeing economic gender parity in our lifetime. It is therefore befitting that the first Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, His Excellency Wamkele Mene, has written forward for Pabwa's ebook of inspirational quotes. Mr. Mene now joins us from Addis Ababa. Welcome, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me.
In your foreword, you state that we shall recall the empowerment of women, young Africans, and other disadvantaged segments of society is a central objective of Agenda 2063. How are you planning to make this reality through the work of AFCTA?
Well, I think, as you correctly point out, the starting point is Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. And when Minister Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma was the chairperson of the African Union Commission, this is during her tenure when this blueprint for Africa's development was adopted. And the challenge that she put to all of us in Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, is how do we place previously marginalized segments of our society, how do we place them at the center of economic development? And it's very clear in its objectives, Agenda 2063, young Africans and women. And so from a trade perspective, for the African Continental Free Trade Area, the challenge is how do we get young Africans in trade, women in trade, as we implement this agreement, how do we bring them on board? And there are various ways in which we can do that we are currently, since we have been established as a secretariat, that we are currently considering, such as, for example, tailored finance for trade for women, tailored technical and capacity building for trade for women, and looking at e-platforms that enable women, digital platforms that enable women to access markets outside of their own countries for export and for trade. These are all specific examples of how a trade agreement can be particular and be tailored for specifically for the advancement of women, who, by the way, have actually been in the forefront of trade for a long time. If you look at the contribution of African women to informal trade in Africa, and informal trade in Africa contributes over 70% of Africa's GDP, and the bulk of that is driven by women traders and women in formal sectors, and in the informal sector. And so we have to create these platforms for women to leverage on the advancements that they have already built over the many years.
Now, many believe that COVID-19 presents an opportunity to reset the global economy. What should happen in the continent? And to the women in business watching and listening to this, what would you say they need to do to help fast track not just inclusion of gender and youth, but also to assist in driving a trade boom?
Well, first, the recovery is going to be difficult. It is going to take a lot of hard work and a lot of discipline from all African countries. You will know as well as I do that the World Bank estimates that sub-Saharan Africa's growth will contract by up to between 2 and 5%, which translates into losses to the GDP, combined GDP of Africa, of up to between 35 and $40 billion just this year alone. So the loss to the economy is quite significant, which is why I say that the recovery is going to be steep and it's going to be very, very difficult. We believe that the best tool that Africa has at stimulating a recovery is implementing the African Continental Free Trade Area, and doing so quite rapidly, because the objective of the African Continental Free Trade Area is to boost intra-Africa trade. So what we foresee is that when we start trading amongst ourselves as Africans, whether it is trade in goods, trade in services, professional services, when we start in earnest engaging in trade and breaking down the investment barriers, breaking down the trade barriers, that will lead to a quicker recovery for Africa. At the moment, Africa stands at 18% in terms of intra-Africa trade, which amongst all regions is the lowest for intra-regional trade. So we have quite a lot of work to do to close this gap of intra-regional trade. And as I say, when we break down the barriers, whether they are tariff barriers, regulatory barriers, when we break down the barriers to trade in Africa, I think we will be able to significantly boost intra-Africa trade. And boosting intra-Africa trade is actually the tool that we need for a sustained recovery year on year from 2021 onwards. So trade is at the heart of Africa's economic recovery. And we don't have, as I've said in other platforms, we as Africa do not have the luxury of a monetary policy space, a fiscal policy space, where a bailout, a stimulus package of over $1 trillion can be provided. Not many African countries are in a position to do that. So the only thing we can do is to drive recovery through trade.
And how has the pandemic affected your original plans to be effective on the 1st of July? And from what you are seeing, how has the pandemic impacted on trade as a business sector?
Well, it has had a very negative impact on our intended date of starting to trade on the 1st of July 2020, which obviously has passed. When you look across Africa, out of 55 countries, 42 are either in a full or partial lockdown. It is only this week that some countries have started opening their borders in their regions. And so trading could not take place. Goods were not transiting because borders were closed. So it was very important to recognize that in the context of closed borders, it's not possible to say with any degree of credibility, it's not possible to say that you're trading. The second point to bear in mind is that governments were singularly focused on fighting the pandemic and saving lives of Africans, which obviously I don't think anybody would discourage that. It was a correct thing to do for governments to focus on fighting the pandemic and saving lives. The ministers of trade in all African countries were involved also in this fight against COVID-19, in the sense that they were looking actively, trying to devise plans to save small, medium enterprises in their countries. And so we thought it was very, very important that governments be allowed the space to fight the pandemic in their countries, and then we resume the work at the appropriate time. So this is why it was not possible to meet this deadline of the 1st of July. It also gives us time to conclude some of the technical work that was outstanding. But for the most part, we had to take account of this unprecedented pandemic and give governments the space to fight the pandemic. And then we will redouble our efforts at trading when the right time comes.
Now, where do you see Africa and African businesses finding opportunities in the world of new normal?
Well, I think what is clear from COVID-19 is that Africa has to relook at its industrial development strategy. This pandemic exposed the fact that we are over-reliant on global supply chains that take us elsewhere. We're over-reliant on the export of primary commodities. And we know that when global commodities markets are subdued, those countries that are over-reliant suffer the most. So we've learned some lessons, and we should take some corrective steps. We've learned some lessons from this pandemic. The manner in which the disruption of the global value chain and global supply chains, the manner in which it has impacted Africa is significantly different from any other continent, because we were over-reliant on imports of products. For example, we're a net importer of food. That doesn't put us in a good position. So we now have to focus on acceleration of our industrial development strategy and acceleration of the establishment of Africa's productive capacity, acceleration of establishment of value chains across the African continent, with a focus on industrial development in Africa. This is the first step that I think we should take. And in that context, in the context of development of value chains in Africa, therein lies opportunities for investment, whether you are talking about trade in services, merchandise trade, and so on. So as we industrialize Africa, there are opportunities for investment that we see both in the area of trade in goods and in the area of services, consultancy, banking, and so on.
So just following up on some of the examples that you have articulated, what would you say are things women and youth-owned businesses need to be doing now to prepare themselves to take advantage of the opportunities that the AfCFTA will bring and that the crisis is likely to bring?
Well, what we are trying to actively consider and to work with partners in Africa is to ensure that there are trade finance facilities that are available across the African continent for the purpose that you've just mentioned. So that if you are a small medium enterprise in Malawi, or a small medium enterprise in Mali, you have access to, if you have a viable export market within Africa, so that you have access to trade finance, you are able to sell your goods to another African country. I think this is always the issue of trade finance liquidity is always a big challenge when it comes to small medium enterprises, particularly those that are run by women. So we have a new challenge, an added challenge, to make sure that we provide, once again, that phrase, the stimulus for small medium enterprises to be able to export their goods and to access these value chains I've just mentioned, to access these value chains by having by having access to trade finance. Young Africans, I think when you look around the African continent, whether you're looking at Lagos, Kigali, Johannesburg, you will find that there are young Africans who are at the cutting edge of innovation for digital platforms, for trade, and for e-commerce. So we have to harness this innovation that is really a part of a response to the fourth industrial revolution and its challenges and its disruptions to trade and investment. So we have to establish the legal frameworks, the policy environment for young Africans to be able to. I'm just making an example of innovation in software for digitization. There are, of course, other areas that potentially we can look at in the context of implementation of the AfCFTA for young Africans and for women in trade.
So is there special documentation, certification, verification, etc., that business would need to have to be part of the AfCFTA? In simple terms, how does AfCFTA become meaningful for small business owner, not just big corporates?
The agreement is implemented at the national level. We work with the national governments, with all 28 countries that have thus far ratified the agreement. We work with them. We assist them to implement their obligations. We assist them to open markets. That is our job. And so the starting point for individuals is to consider whether or not their government has ratified the agreement. Because if your government has not ratified the agreement, you will not have access to the new markets that are created. So it's very important that where you live, your government is a state party, what we call a state party to the agreement. That's the starting point. Then, of course, your individual ministry of trade, investment will advise you what opportunities are presented to you by the agreement. We work with them in identifying those opportunities for small, medium enterprises and big corporations, of course. So it's a two-pronged approach. You need your national government, but also the Secretariat is here to assist in identification of new markets as we proceed.
Thank you, Wamkele. Of course, today we're launching a Pabwa ebook of quotes. Do you have a particular quote that inspires you?
I think all of us are inspired by President Mandela, and the one that quote that particularly resonates with me is when he said that it all seems impossible until it's done. Remember, we were told that Africa will never be able to come together and become an integrated market. We have taken the first step towards that. And so it seemed as if it's impossible, and we've taken the first step. We have a long way to go, of course, but I think we can confidently say that we are taking giant steps towards the integration of a market in Africa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wamkele Mene, for taking time out to provide wise words to the women of Pabwa on this special occasion of the launch of the organization's ebook of quotes.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. I look forward to working with Pabwa. We will have, as I indicated much earlier in the year, we will have a very strong focus on women in trade and the AfCFTA. So I look forward to working with you in that partnership. Thank you very much.
Thank you.